Chapter 1. Karak's eyes shone with liquid fire that burned through the morning mist. The god paced across the dead brown earth covering the valley in which his army camped, his gaze constantly returning to the walled township that loomed in the distance. Velixar saw anger in his stare, anger that grew even more pronounced whenever he looked at the massive tree that had risen from the ground, sealing the gap in the wall his fireball had created. The deity's giant hands curled into fists, and the brightness of his eyes intensified. It was only when he turned his head to see his near 15,000 children busy at work that his stern expression softened even the tiniest bit. The morning air was crisp, and the evening dew still lingered, causing Velixar's cloak to cling to his flesh. Though a cool wind blew, the High Prophet felt no chill. The fire burning inside him, stoked by the demon whose essence he had swallowed, was all the warmth he needed. He had risen before sunrise, along with Lord Commander Malcolm Gregorian, joining the one-eyed man in awakening more than 200 of the soldiers who had been sleeping fitfully in their tents. There was much work to do, bark that needed to be stripped, stakes that required sharpening, sanded timber that had to be fastened together with twine and iron nails. It all filled the wide expanse of the valley with a bustle of activity as saws ripped through wood and hammers thumped. Yet despite the soldiers' work, despite all the lessons Karak taught them, progress was maddeningly slow. They'd built 60 ladders, stacked neatly in 12 piles to the left of the construction site, but they had only managed to finish 3 meager siege engines over the 11 days since their initial attack on Mordeina's walls. 2 solid towers, and a single catapult. The rest of the partially formed engines sat useless throughout the valley, half-formed giants awaiting the necessary materials to complete them. It wasn't the soldiers' fault, Velixar knew, when Ashhur, Karak's brother god, had created a legion of greyhorn men to defend his people. He had stripped the land of life, which accounted for the dead grass crunching beneath their feet. The trees of the nearby forest were brittle as spent tinder sticks, crumbling away in a rain of dust when struck by an axe. A weakened Karak had tried to raise more trees from deep within the soil, but it seemed Ashhur had decimated the land to such an extent that nothing could grow there any longer.
"It will be years until this earth is fertile again,"
Karak had told him with a growl.
"I have no time for this."
And so the soldiers carried their axes a mile toward the god's road, chopped down the trees in the healthy forest, and lugged the trunks all the way back to the camp, where they could be stripped and quartered and assembled into tools of war. Velixar eyed the workers, sweat dripping off their brows as they slaved away. He did not like the weariness in their expressions, or the labor in their movements. Each hammer seemed to weigh 100 pounds. Each plank lifted with a grunt as if it weighed 10 times that much. The soldiers were tired and hungry, and each morning he noticed that a handful who had been working dutifully the day before had disappeared in the night. The previous evening, he'd ordered the Lord Commander to have the camp watched while it slept, and Malcolm's sentries caught 6 soldiers attempting to tiptoe out of the valley under the cover of darkness. Those 6 were now fastened to a post in front of the camp, beaten and bound by throat, wrist, and ankle, pleading for mercy with any who passed within earshot. As morning progressed, and the clouds passed over the sun, the pleading of those captured intensified. Velixar stood back and watched with interest as a soldier approached the bound men, offering a cup of mulled wine. Malcolm was on the soldier a second later, yanking him backward by the hair and tossing him to the ground. The Lord Commander pressed his boot into the man's throat, his one good eye watching the young soldier struggle. None of the other soldiers came forward to aid their distressed comrade. Despite the fact that his left arm was still in a sling, every soldier knew Malcolm Gregorian was not to be trifled with. Finally, the soldiers' protests dwindled, and Malcolm removed his foot before giving him a swift kick in the side and demanding he get back to work. Velixar felt a heavy hand fall on his shoulder, and he gazed up at Karak's face.
"Yes, my lord," he asked quietly.
The god knelt beside him.
"There is unrest among my children," he said.